As long as any of us can remember, our great nation has been riddled with problems of bias and brutality against colors of skin different than our own. Generations upon generations have pushed others away, turned our fellow Americans against each other, all because of something as arbitrary as the pigment in our skin. This racism and xenophobia is deeply rooted within our nation and its legislation. Laws made nearly 100 years ago are still manipulating the climate of today's society. And as I will talk about now, it is important that the newer generations understand this correlation between drug policy in America and the racism that spawned them. So now's the time for a little history lesson. Drugs once used without stigma are now illegal and strictly policed, but what most people don't know is the reasoning behind such strict policies is the race of the group that introduced and popularized them. The very first criminal law at the federal level in America to criminalize the non-medical use of drugs came in 1914, the Harrison Act. The Harrison Act applied mainly to two drugs, the first of which was opium. Chinese immigrants popularized recreational opium smoking when they came to the U.S. to work on the railroad and in the gold mines. White men of the time were in fear that the Chinese men, using their powerful new drug, would seduce all the white women. Apparently unrelated, the Harrison Act banned the importation, possession, and use of smoking opium, favored by the Chinese, but did not criminalize opium injecting, favored by the whites. The second drug was cocaine. All were using the drug, whether in beverages or in its powder and crack forms, but when black people started using, some people got worried. A New York Times article written in 1914 by Dr. Edward Williams even claimed cocaine use caused blacks to rape white women and was improving their pistol marksmanship. At the time, people caught with crack cocaine were 100 times more severely punished than powdered cocaine, and it just so happens that minority communities predominantly used crack since it was cheaper and more accessible, meaning harsher punishments for non-whites. The next big drug law was the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. This law started a national marijuana prohibition. As immigrants from Mexico and the West Indies popularized cannabis smoking in America, the public started demonizing them for their use of the drug. Opponents of the drug even popularized the name to be marijuana to sound more Mexican. Despite being one of the least harmful of these substances, charges for possession were at one point to hold a minimum of 2 to 10 years, and repeat offenders could even receive life sentences for the multiple non-violent misdemeanors. And despite similar usage rates, black people are still 3.73 times more likely to be arrested. In the end, it has been proven that African Americans are more likely to die a drug-related death than whites. And roughly half of the people in prison are incarcerated on drug-related charges, and approximately $1 trillion has been spent on the war on drugs. Scholars Jeffrey Myron and Catherine Waldock estimate that the United States could save roughly $41.3 billion per year by legalizing certain drugs, not to mention that many of these drugs could be used to treat PTSD, seizures, schizophrenia, and many harmful other diseases. The American people need to be educated so as to take action against the harmful rhetoric of these laws and potentially change them to allow the drugs to heal others. The stereotypes formed with the help of these laws can be demolished to allow for a safer place for all races in America.